Right, there has been mixed reaction to the retraction of apartheid remarks by FW De Klerk and, of course, his foundation. Yesterday, the former president and his foundation unconditionally withdrew and apologized for the comments and the confusion, anger and hurt that they caused. This, of course, De Klerk made the remarks on a TV interview with the SABC, and last Friday, his foundation issued a statement saying that the apartheid political system, which he presided over in its final days, was not a crime against humanity. Meanwhile, advocate Dali Mpofu started a non-partisan citizens campaign on social media in the hope of approaching the Nobel Foundation to take back the Nobel Peace Prize from FW De Klerk. He joins us now in studio to discuss this further. Good to see you, Advocate. Thanks so much for coming in.
Good morning. Good to see you again, Leanne.
So you put out that tweet, and it was during the early hours of the morning. I woke up yesterday, I saw that, and it kind of was gaining traction as South Africans were waking up. By the time we got off air, you'd already reached that mark. You had said, if I get 10,000 retweets, we will embark on this. Did you expect this reaction?
No, I must confess I didn't, Leanne. I thought maybe we'll hit the 10,000 by Wednesday, Thursday. But for it to happen within 8 hours, as it did, and the last time I checked now, I think we were above 17 or 18,000. That I didn't expect. But I did have a sense that I was not the only one who was so outraged by this. And that's exactly why I put up that challenge.
Yeah. I want to park that for now because I want to see where to from here. But I want to go back to what has unfolded since then. We have seen an apology coming from the foundation. What did you make of that apology?
No, I think the apology is actually, should be rejected with the contempt that it deserves. Because you can't, even if you look at the apology itself, it says that, so something about timing, this is not the right time. In other words, this is not the right time to tell us that apartheid was not a crime against humanity. There might be another good time, So, and then, of course, they talk about confusion. There's no confusion. It's very clear. You can't say, so if somebody harbored those feelings about apartheid for 30 years, that's not confusion. It's very clear that that's what they think. And the arrogance of it all is that the perpetrators are now telling us how to feel about the crime that they perpetrated on us. Just imagine, Leanne, if somebody get raped and then the rapist says, no, it's not that bad, I only raped you for 2 hours. Other people get raped for 8 hours, So it's not that bad. Don't call it a horrific experience. Because and give you dictionary meanings that well, it's horrific when it's 3 hours, but not when it's 2 hours. What nonsense is that? And that's exactly what De Klerk is doing. But the worst thing is that De Klerk represents a large section of our population that believe in this kind of thing, that apartheid somehow had redeeming features. You had Helen Zille saying the same thing last year. So it's a question of making sure that once and for all we put this debate onto the table. Those who are genuinely interested in reconciliation must accept that reconciliation will only come once we have kind of taken it all out, the good, the bad and the ugly. And then we say, okay, this is what happened. How do we move on from there? But if people keep on moving us backwards and backwards, we will never have genuine reconciliation.
Yeah, wasn't that the aim of the TRC? And what are your views on that? Let's go back to those days.
Well, the good thing about the TRC, I have my own views about what actually happened. But what I always say about the TRC, I just like the name, the TRC, the truth and reconciliation. Because without the truth, there's no reconciliation. That's really what this whole debate is all about. If we don't deal with the truth, we must forget about reconciliation. And of course, if there's no reconciliation, there's no justice and reparations and those kinds of things. That was so far away from even dealing with what should be done in order to recompense.
Yeah, there's been so much said since Parliament and what we saw happening within the walls of Parliament and the EFF stimulating this conversation, because honestly they did. But the reality is these comments were made a while ago during that television interview here at the SABC, where FW De Klerk blatantly said that it was not a crime against humanity, it almost fell on silent ears. Nobody really took that very seriously. Were you planning all along after you heard that to bring this up in Parliament? Because it seemed to have taken everybody by surprise that you guys brought this up the way you did.
Yeah, look, the EFF must be commended for once again bringing an issue to the fore, which, as you say, you know, maybe we've become numb to this kind of racism, because that's really what it is. It's racism to tell black people that they didn't suffer that much. And maybe we have become numb to it, and the EFF did bring it up, and I think that was a good thing. It was not a question of planning. I mean, it was an issue. Actually, the Speaker was approached, I believe, by the EFF to say, withdraw the invitation. And they refused to do so. So that is why then the protest was done in Parliament.
I know there was a threat made from the EFF saying not to have FW De Klerk there. So you actually approached the Speaker to say, withdraw the invitation of FW De Klerk.
Absolutely. And I mean, firstly, I must, by the way, commend you, the SABC, because that was a very good interview by Maneli Situbasa, you know, and also Sakina's interview yesterday with Pulamabe was also good. But yeah, no, there was that approach. And of course, I mean, you had in Parliament that actually the MPs were saying, no, it's fine, there's nothing wrong, you know, De Klerk is here. And I always ask myself, just to make an example, let's say you had an invitation to De Klerk, and then a week before, he does something completely, you know, abominable, you know, molests a child. I'm sorry for me to make that crude example. Then what do? You withdraw the invitation, obviously, because something has then happened, even if it was well meant at the beginning. But now in South Africa, if someone practices apartheid denialism, you know, the invitation stays. Do you know that in many countries, Holocaust denialism is a crime?
Yeah.
It's you actually go to jail.
Absolutely.
And there's no difference between what De Klerk is doing and that. No, none whatsoever. So that's why I'm saying we've either become numb or insensitive to the pain that people suffered. And De Klerk actually says that there was no genocide. He says that in the interview. Now, what's the definition of genocide? Genocide is a mass killing of people because of their race or their ethnicity. Now, if that did not happen in South Africa, then I don't know what we witnessed for all those years. If all that, the suffering that was caused, and you know, Leanne, I always say, sometimes we make it easy when we talk about the horrors of apartheid by just referring to the people who were killed. Just put that aside, you know, put Steve Biko, Mxenge, and all those people aside. Just think of the mass suffering that was caused by forced removals, by you know, segregated residences, the people who were put in like sardines in the mines. You name it, you've got it. And that happened over decades and decades. Now, for anybody to say that was not horrific, or it was actually not that bad, it really is it's the ultimate insult.
These have opened up a lot of wounds in South Africans, and I think you've spoken to it well. It's this issue of denialism. It's the issue that there is a section in South African society that believe that apartheid wasn't bad, that apartheid actually, you're over-exaggerating it. But the people that are living here today still live with the pains of apartheid. Let me get to where I'm going with this. You've opened up this conversation. You, knowing the law, do you think that you have a case to go to the Nobel Peace Prize organization and say to them, you've got to remove this, you don't understand what is going on in our country? Do you think you have a leg to stand on here? Do you think this, even though people are saying the probability of you getting it withdrawn is close to zero?
No, there are two things, Leanne. The first one, I don't understand why anybody would even pose that question. If I'm given a prize for loving animals, you know, and then I'm caught actually torturing animals, do you think I should keep that prize? I mean, what kind of a question is that? So that's the one thing. The second issue is then it's a procedural issue, whether the rules of the Nobel Foundation allow for the withdrawal of prizes. Now, we know that they don't because that was tried in Myanmar. But as I was saying, if you're an activist, that's music to your ears. The mere fact that something has not been done before is exactly what makes you to do it. So imagine if somebody said, you know, do you want your land back? And you say, no, yeah, we want our land back, but the Constitution doesn't allow it. I mean, you make it happen. You don't say, no, it does. The word cannot or does not exist in the world of activism. So, and that's why my tweet that you referred to says that I'm mobilizing people to approach the Nobel Foundation. So nobody can stop us from approaching. They can only say no. So that's the whole point about our campaign.
So it's more of an approach. If you get anywhere with it, then great.
Well, we will. We can't approach just for the sake of approaching. We're approaching for the sake of succeeding. But we can't have a defeatist approach that says, oh, well, the rules must be changed then. If the problem is the rules must be changed. Because the whole point, remember, this is an international prize that is meant to incentivize other people to want to achieve peace. Now, how are those people going to be incentivized by a person who's an apartheid denialist?
So the reality is that the apology, or the so-called apology that came out yesterday, has not changed your view in any way. In fact, this has even got you more determined because you feel that this was not sincere.
No, it's not sincere. It's 30 years too late, and it's feeble and it's badly worded. And it can be sincerely. And remember when De Klerk made the statement to Manelisi Tubasa's interview about 3 weeks ago, that was, and then there was the halabaloo in Parliament. Then over the weekend, the De Klerk Foundation issued a statement justifying it. This is 3 times. And then when they hear that there's now an uproar and a new halabaloo, they make a half-hearted apology. Anyone who believes that really needs their heads to be examined.
Have you approached the organization as yet? The Nobel laureate? Have you, not laureate, I beg your pardon, the Nobel Peace Prize? Have you approached
foundation.
them?
No, not yet. No, it's a staged, I mean, we started with the Twitter campaign, which was very successful. I mean, we almost doubled the target. So the other good thing about that is that I then got many people who volunteered to assist. So I've got about 10 or 12 people who are going to assist with this. And now what the next stage, in my view, which I've suggested to them, is that we should do a signature campaign, collect signatures, physical signatures, so that by the time we approach the foundation, we actually have proof to say X number of whatever the number we will agree on. X number of signatures. These are South Africans who, you know, from across the political spectrum, religious spectrum. It's a non-partisan campaign who feel that this man does not deserve this. And yeah, it will be done. There's no rush. We're going to do it systematically, but you can bet that it's going to be done.
All right, so this was one issue to come out of Parliament, which we saw, and it's really gaining momentum and gaining traction as the days and hours tick on. I mean, our whole show is going to be focusing on this as well. But I want to move on. We see that happening at the beginning of Parliament. You really get attention as the EFF, and then the whole Pravin Gordhan issue comes up, and then this goes on and on and on and on and on, and an hour and a half later, the whole nation is still waiting for the State of the Nation address until the EFF stop. Is that fair?
It's more than fair. You know, people don't understand protest. Protest is by definition uncomfortable. So if people here in the studio want to protest, they will come here and block this or block the road or whatever. Protest, that's what protest is. It's disruptive. When you march in the street, you have to call the police and the traffic cops to block the traffic. That's what protest is. And peaceful protest is allowed. And it can be done in any creative way. And there's no, imagine if we went to Parliament and protested there when there's nobody and watching. So the best time when everybody is watching, when everyone's attention is there, that's when you do your protest. That's how it was done with the Zuma regime, and that's how it's going to be done even now. And anybody who's ever been an activist will know that you know, you don't march at night. You march during the day when people are watching. What
is your beef with Pravin Gordhan? What is the EFF's beef with him?
Well, I'm not here to speak for the EFF, but from what I understand, the issue is about the mismanagement of the state-owned enterprises, and that's one of the key issues. And the feeling is that, if it was any other minister who was not one, the favorite buddy of the president, then he would have been called to account, and various other issues. And again, I don't think that's a person, at least when I was in the leadership of the EFF, people were telling us that, oh, well, but you supported him when he was being persecuted by Zuma. And I mean, that's another argument I don't understand. If I support you when you are being persecuted by Sakina, then, the next time you do something wrong, I can't now condemn you because last week I supported you. What is that? So the issues in politics are dealt with as they arise.
Yeah, but a lot of people say that this is a personal beef and nothing more than that.
Personal how?
Well, there's reports out about, again, you say you're not here speaking on behalf of the EFF, and it's with the leader of the EFF, Julius Malema. Perhaps the time that Pravin Gordhan was at SARS, perhaps he has information about him. Perhaps it's a personal beef that is going on at the moment.
Okay, well, then let's turn it around. If it's as a personal beef, then why did Julius Malema support Pravin Gordhan when he was being persecuted?
Because that was another personal beef with Zuma.
Well, you see, so I mean that's a debate to nowhere. Yeah, so it's a personal. It's not a personal. It's a political campaign. It's a political campaign. If you are happy with load shedding and everything that's going on, well, that's fine. That's your prerogative. But those people who are not happy must protest and voice their protest.
Yeah.
And
what happens now? I mean, we're sitting in a situation where we've got the one side fighting against the other, and we need change, we need direction, we need to know what's going on in terms of the governance of this country.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you talk about South Africans sitting in the dark, and if I'm happy with, I am not happy with this.
I don't think,
absolutely, I don't think many people are sitting in the dark. But seeing politicians fighting, is that really getting us anywhere?
Yeah, no, politicians fight. That's what democracy means. Democracy is not a one-party state. If you watch the British Parliament, if you watch the current race in the US, you'll realize you're going to see the debates that you will see there. Yeah, as long as there's no bloodshed. That's what it's about. It's about contestation of ideas. Because if you don't contest ideas, then we're all going to be stale. And that's what apartheid wanted us to do. If you had a different view, you get thrown into jail. Fortunately, we don't throw people into jail now. But that's how things come about. I mean, look at what the EFF did with the land question. It's raised that question robustly, and it's now at least part of the mainstream debate. It raised issues of the sovereign wealth fund, which I think the government people had never even heard of. Yeah. And now I can assure you in the speech of Tito Mboweni next week when they do the budget, they're going to introduce the Sovereign Wealth Fund. So if you don't have opposition to come up with ideas, in Johannesburg, the EFF introduced the issue of insourcing 24-hour clinics as opposition, and those things are now happening. That's the role. That's how a democracy develops.
Yeah.
So forget about the drama. The drama is just there to catch people's attention. But any democracy will only thrive when different views are put together. And my own view, by the way, as you are asking, is that we probably need something like a government of national unity if we're going to move from the hole that we're in now. It's no longer something that the EFF or the ANC or the DA or this one or that one can resolve. It's a national crisis that affects all of us. And maybe if this president was as wise as he's cracked out to be, he would have done that after the last election to say, okay, we've won the election, so we've got the bragging rights, but I would like to galvanize the entire South Africa. Let's all put shoulders to the wheel and get out of this. We'll contest again later as different parties. But for now, let's get out of the hole. But there's no such creative thinking. I mean, there's no leadership in this country.
But do you really think, we're into news time, but do you really think, as the leader of the ANC, he would just give up power like that and say, yeah, let's give a national, we've won, or is the idea of politics not to hold on to power for as long as you possibly can?
Yeah, no, I don't really think that, because as I say, there's no leadership. I'm saying if there was a visionary leader which there isn't. That's the kind of, you ask me, how can we come out of this? I'm saying that's one of the ways in which we can come out of this. But do I think it's going to happen under this leadership? Zero.
Let's leave it there. Thank you for joining us. Advocate Dali Mpofu started a non-partisan citizens campaign on social media and hopes to approach the Nobel Foundation to take back the Nobel Peace Prize from FW De Klerk. That, of course, is also our lead story in the news. I'll hand you to Sakina for details about that.